All rise. Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. United States District Court for the Western District of North Carolina is now sitting for ceremonial purposes. The Honorable Kenneth E. Bell, Judge of the United States District Court, presiding. All persons having business before this court are admonished to draw near, and they shall be heard. God save these United States and this honorable court.
Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. This memorial session of the Supreme Court is now in session. The Honor Louis A. Trust Jr. presiding. All persons having business before this court are admonished to draw near, and they shall be heard. God save the state, North Carolina, and this honorable court. Please be seated. Come to order.
Today, we gather together in a joint session of the federal and state courts to recognize the service and the life of one of our number, Mr. Robert L. Mendenhall.
This memorial service is a time-honored tradition in Mecklenburg County when the brothers and sisters of the bar pay homage to the life and times of one of our profession, of one who has shared this unique discipline that binds us all together.
Today, we recognize that life and those achievements as a matter of public record for the sake of our historic and corporate memory.
I will now recognize Brad Kutro, a member of the Mecklenburg County Bar Memorials Committee, who will now tell you more about this time-honored tradition of our bar.
May it please the court, I'm Brad Kutro of the Mecklenburg County Bar Memorials Committee. And with the court's leave, I would like to address the gallery from the lectern.
You may.
Yes, sir.
On behalf of the Mecklenburg County Bar, we welcome the family, friends, and colleagues of Bob Mendenhall. I want to thank you all for joining us today in the courtroom or virtually. For the past 70 years, the Mecklenburg County Bar has held memorial sessions of court for members of the bar who've died to celebrate their careers and remember their accomplishments. As far as we can determine, we're the only local bar that has this tradition, and we're very proud of it and the role that these sessions play in preserving our memories of individual practitioners and the collective history of our bar. Today, Mr. Hayden Brown, like me, a former colleague of Bob's, will present a memorial resolution honoring Robert L. Mendenhall. That resolution will be presented to the court, and the filed resolution will be included in the minutes of the Mecklenburg County Superior Court and maintained with all the preceding resolutions in a bound volume in the Clerk of Court's office. And it will also be posted online at the Mecklenburg County Bar's website. Let me now turn this proceeding over to my colleague and friend, Hayden Brown.
Please record.
It does.
Judge Bell, Judge Trosh, Judge Conrad, Lauren Mendenhall, and by live stream to Chuck and Laura Mendenhall in Texas, and Ray and Ann Mendenhall in Kentucky, members of the bar and friends and colleagues of Bob Mendenhall. On behalf of the Mecklenburg County Bar, we present this resolution in memorial this afternoon honoring the life and memory of our friend and former law partner, Robert L. Bob or Bobby Mendenhall. Bob was born and raised in Greensboro, North Carolina, the third son of the late Margaret and Charles Mendenhall. Bob graduated from Grimsley High School in 1972 and from Davidson College in 1976 with a degree in economics, with great stories from being a Wildcat cheerleader and with a devoted group of friends for life, and several of whom are here today. He spent several special summers in the 70s as a swimming instructor and counselor at Camp Allegheny for Girls in the West Virginia mountains. Those summers were another source of deep friendship and great stories. After Davidson, Bob worked for NCNB as a field auditor in Eastern North Carolina. Bob then earned his MBA and law degrees at UNC Chapel Hill in 1983, where he was a member of the Law Review and its business manager. When I was asked to present this resolution by Bob's friends and colleagues, I quickly responded that I would be honored to speak. because I was lucky enough to have known and worked with Bob for over 30 years. We offer a few words about our friend to celebrate his gentle and kind spirit and his noteworthy career. Bob had a distinguished career as a tax lawyer in Charlotte, practicing at Helms, Mollison, Johnston, Smith, Helms, Mollison, Moore, Blanchfield, Cordell, and Moore, Mayor Brown, and Holland and Knight. Through it all, Bob was highly regarded by colleagues and clients all over the country, not only for highly sophisticated legal work in the areas of tax credit transactions and nonprofit organizations, but also for his intelligence, his leadership, and his unsurpassed collegiality. Bob served the bar as a member of the State Disciplinary Committee and as an officer of the North Carolina Bar Association's tax section, where he was often asked to make continuing legal education presentations. Bob served as the pro bono general counsel to the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Housing Partnership, now known as Green Key Partners, for more than 3 decades, a remarkable achievement and illustrative of his devotion to his community. And he acted within his various law firms as an ombudsperson and pro bono coordinator, working with legal services of the Southern Piedmont, including coordinating with Bank of America on organizing the Wills on Wheels program, which prepared wills for senior citizens. Few observations about Bob exemplify what a great lawyer he was. First, if you ever entered Bob's office, he would smile through stacks of paper from behind his desk, jump up, wade through the stacks on his floor, and clear piles of papers from a chair to provide a place to sit. He always had time to visit, provide considered, sage advice. And Bob could never end a conversation in under 20 minutes. He had lots of questions and tales to tell about his kids and his dogs. These characteristics might sound like shortcomings to some, but they also underlie why Bob was such a great lawyer. Bob cared. He was so interested in what was going on that he had to get to the root cause of everything. He always sought the best and most complete answer to whatever he was working on, or whatever might be troubling someone who wandered into the seeming chaos of his office. He also knew that his advice was going to have long-term consequences. He instinctively knew that he might need to revisit earlier advice, so he kept everything within reach. Bob was there for everyone. His door was always open to partners, associates, and staff, and we all knew to go to Bob when we needed help, support, or advice. That is what made Bob a great lawyer and a great friend. And we need to honor Bob as the wonderful father of Lauren and his beloved bonus children, Matt Miller and Kristen Fresco. He was completely devoted to them and loved them dearly. Lauren is here today, taking a partial day off from her senior year at Elon, where her studies may well be preparing her to follow in her father's footsteps with a career at the bar. We will all follow her progress with deep interest. Lauren, we hope you know that you couldn't follow a better lawyer role model than your dad. In closing, to paraphrase the recent words of 2 of his dear friends from Davidson that are echoed by everyone who knew and therefore loved Bob Mendenhall, he was the kindest, sweetest lawyer friend I ever had. And if the world had more lawyers like him, it would be a better place. If it please the court, with love and respect for Bob Mendenhall, on behalf of the Mecklenburg County Bar, we move that when the court adjourns this session, it do so in memory of and out of respect for Robert L. Mendenhall. The original resolution and memorial be received by the court and inscribed in its minutes, and copies of this resolution and memorial be made available to Lauren Mendenhall, his beloved daughter, Matt Miller and Kristen Fresco, his beloved bonus children, and it's to his brothers, Chuck and Ray Mendenhall. What's next?
I believe at this point, the court would invite any who would like to speak about Bob to approach the podium and give us your thoughts. Ms. Mandeville. You may.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Mandeville, and I was lucky enough to be a colleague of Bob Mendenhall's for a very long time, many, many years, and a friend of his for many years more than that. After Bob passed away, Wells Hall, who I think many of you know is a prominent tax lawyer in Charlotte, prepared some comments to be distributed to the North Carolina Bar Association tax section. He wrote up a column on remembering Bob, and Wells can't be here today, but he asked me if I would share them with you, and I'm honored to do that, and also grateful that I get to read Wells's words, many of which I would echo, but sometimes it's easier reading what somebody else has to say. So this is Wells' column, Remembering Bob Mendenhall. Bob Mendenhall, former chair of the North Carolina Bar Association section of taxation, passed away on July 14th, 2022 at the Charlotte Rehab Center, one day before his 68th birthday. When I spoke to Bob shortly before his death, he told me about his surgery to remove a blood clot after a head injury resulting from a fall in May. He knew that his recovery would take some time, but he looked forward to resuming his law practice at Holland and Knight in Charlotte. He shared with me his daughter Lauren's summer plans prior to her junior year at Elon. He was so proud of her. Bob was registered to attend the tax section workshops at Kiowa Island, South Carolina, over Memorial Day weekend last year. He was very much looking forward to attending the first in-person workshops. He had to cancel when he was hospitalized after his fall. A regular attendee at the tax section workshops and council meetings for over 30 years, Bob's absence was noted. Bob had served several terms on the council and held every office: treasurer, secretary, vice chair, and chair of the section. He always had a welcome hand to young lawyers attending the meetings for the first time. The section is much better as a result of Bob's passion and perseverance in supporting the CLE, pro bono, and fellowship activities of the tax section. Bob's tax career began with a job with North Carolina National Bank as an audit officer just out of Davidson College. And on the Davidson front, I'll note that Bob Cordell is dressed in his Davidson gear in honor of Bob Mendenhall. He enrolled in the joint JD MBA program at the University of North Carolina School of Law, where Bob excelled. He served as a staff member and business manager of the North Carolina Law Review and served as treasurer of the Student Bar Association. Upon graduation, he worked with Arthur Anderson as a tax accountant, and then he joined Helms, Mullis & Johnston with a strong group of young associates, which included Ernie Regal, who later became Morin Van Allen's managing partner, and Adrian Wilson, who became the chair of the North Carolina Bar Association Young Lawyers Division. Bob made partner in the tax practice at Smith Helms Mullis & Moore, doing sophisticated tax, partnership, and corporate work for significant clients like NCNB, which became Nations Bank and later Bank of America, as we all know. Bob left Smith Helms with Frank Blanchfield and several other partners in the mid-1990s to form a tax and litigation boutique firm representing major corporate and high net worth clients, including the Nations Bank's tax department. When Nations Bank acquired Bank of America in October of 1998, Mayer Brown & Platt, which was at the time a top 20 national law firm, decided to open a Charlotte office and tapped the lawyers at Blanchfield, Cordell & Moore to kick it off. Frank Blanchfield was the first office managing partner. The office quickly grew to over 50 lawyers, fueled by Charlotte's banking, finance, and tax work. I, meaning Wells, joined Mayer Brown in June 2000 and became Bob's partner for the next 13 years. Our offices were a few doors apart, and we shared the same legal secretary, Sandy, who soon came to be called our administrative assistant. At a Mayer Brown firm partner meeting, Hugh McCall, our guest speaker, told the Mayer Brown partners that the bank would not have been where it is now if Frank Blanchfield and his team had not obtained the private letter ruling that permitted Nations Bank of North Carolina to outbid other banks, many times its size, to acquire First Republic Bank of Dallas out of the FDIC receivership, and in which it inherited billions of dollars of net operating loss carry forwards, eliminating its federal tax obligations and fueling its growth and expansion for years to come. The novel legal analysis developed by Blanchfield and his legal team, which included Bob Mendenhall, prompted the IRS and Congress to tighten the rules under Section 382, which limits the NOL carry forwards when there is a change of control of a loss corporation. Bob served as pro bono general counsel for the Dream Key Partners, formerly the Charlotte Mecklenburg Housing Partnership, from 1990 through his death. He served on the board of directors of Lifespan from 1987 to 2015 and as vice chair and chair of the board. He was recognized as the recipient of the firm-wide awards at both Mayer Brown and Holland and Knight for his pro bono public and charitable service. And Wells reached out to several lawyers who had practiced with Bob over the years and offered their comments as well. And these are brief, but I'll start with Chris Henson, who was a Mayer Brown partner and is now with Alston and Bird, says, Bob is one of the kindest people you could ever meet. He always tried to do good and look for the good. I will miss his guidance and friendship. I am really upset about this. I was going to meet him in rehab this week and wish I had gone earlier. Myron Moore, who was a partner of Bob's at Smith Helms and Blanchfield, Cordell & Moore, and then at Mayer Brown, says, Bob was a terrific lawyer and law partner. He was also kind and generous with a marvelous sense of humor. Bob was a dear friend, and he will be missed by many folks. Justin Thornton, a criminal tax lawyer in Washington, D.C., and member of the North Carolina Bar, and who I'm happy to say is with us today, said this, a good friend and colleague for over 30 years, Bob Mendenhall will be missed immensely. He was a stellar tax lawyer who earned the respect and admiration of his clients and fellow members of the bar. I was honored to have worked with him on numerous tax matters over the years, and most of all, to have been his friend. And finally, I had shared some comments with Wells, and I started working with Bob in 1987 as a law clerk at the time Smith Helms, Mullis & Moore. I met Bob in 1987 when I was a summer clerk during law school. Bob took me and other clerks under his wing, showed us the ropes at the firm, and introduced us to all sorts of favorite Charlotte haunts, many of which are sadly no longer here. Which really gave me a sense, though, at the time of the place that would become my home. I was lucky to work with Bob for much of my career, and he was one of my favorite people to brainstorm with about cases and legal issues and life in general. Bob was analytical, thoughtful, practical, generous, funny, and kind to the core, a great lawyer, colleague, and friend. And Wells closed, and I think we all agree, those of us who knew Bob are better for it. Thank you.
Next.
I'm Ken Shore. I had not actually planned to speak, but I'm listening to this. I can't help myself. I was the director of the Legal Services Southern Piedmont and Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy for most of Bob's legal career. And I remember him well in his role as an active volunteer, both in pro bono work and in helping with our annual campaigns to fund the program. He was prolific in those roles, and there are also many other lawyers present here today who have been very prolific in that. But what I remember particularly about him was that when I called him to ask him to do something, he not only without fail agreed to do it, but he was spectacularly cheerful. And when you call and ask people to volunteer, that is not a uniform response. But he was wonderful to work with. About 25 years ago, the Internal Revenue Service Ombudsman Program established a low-income taxpayer clinic system, and the Legal Services Southern Piedmont applied to be one of the original agencies to run the Western North Carolina Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic. And we talked to Frank and his small firm, which had just then become Mayer Brown, and they paid the entire grant match for the first year of the program. The check was blown up into one of these presentation checks on hardboard, and it lived propped against the wall behind my office door for decades. It was, I think, the biggest single contribution we had had to that point, and for some considerable time after. The last thing is, for the last 6 years of his service on at Dream Key Partners, I was on the board and watched him serve as general counsel. And I've seen lots of people in lots of volunteer roles, but being general counsel to Dream Key Partners was an unbelievable task. It was a nonprofit housing developer that at any given time would have a dozen or more real estate construction projects in progress, financing, construction, all of the dynamics of that. The board met monthly. The board packets were over 100 pages, most of which were financial statements. It challenged my ability to serve as a board member, although I did budgets as a part of my work. And he was the general counsel for that for decades. It was just a huge commitment of time, and he was cheerful and friendly and always prepared in that role too. He was a great guy to work with, and I'll miss him. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to share their thoughts with us? Mr. I.
Please, the court. I'm Doug I. Along with Dave Kirkman, Alan Duncan, and Banks Peacock, we met Bob in September 1972 on our freshman hall, 3rd Watts at Davidson College. And that was the beginning of a 50+ year run with one of my best friends. He was the godfather to my son, JD, who's here today. And I think I can say that he was one of the fixtures in our children's life from the time they came into this world in the late 80s and early 90s on for probably 15 years. He was at our dinner table at Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve and putting together all manner of toys and games and stuff on Christmas morning with us. Losing Bob last year was one of the great blows that that a lot of us have endured. But I just want to say to Lauren how lucky we all were to have him as part of our lives for as long as we did, and how we're not going to let that memory go, and we're going to count on you to pay it forward for him. Thank you.
Thank you. I knew you couldn't resist.
May it please the court.
Okay.
20 years ago, in the spring of 2023, I was nominated to the federal bench along with the Honorable Brent J. McKnight. After quickly submitting a blue slip for Judge McKnight, then Senator Edwards took a considerably longer time studying my nomination. His lengthy period of contemplation gave me the opportunity to join my friend Judge Bell in private practice with Mayor Brown to meet the many wonderful lawyers there, one of whom was Bob Mendenhall. I learned many things from and about Bob. I learned that he and my wife went to the same high school in Greensboro. I learned about Bob's passion for excellence in the practice of law. I learned that this sophisticated tax lawyer had been quite the party animal in college, studying with the likes of Doug I, who I learned was known as Dog, Alan Duncan, and others. I learned that although thoroughly versed in the tax code, Bob's primary concern was his daughter, Lauren. We had many lengthy discussions about life outside the law and particularly the importance of family. Many of our discussions occurred at a bar owned by Chief Probation Officer Greg Forrest's brother called Blue, located in the then Hearst Tower. During the day, an email would come from Mendenhall or Ken Bell or Frank Blanchfield that would say Blue 6.5. Everyone would know where to gather at the end of the workday, or in Bob's case, sometimes the beginning of his work night. Bob was wickedly funny and sometimes politically incorrect. I once received this email from him. The Washington Redskins are changing their name because of all the hatred, violence, and hostility currently associated with their name. From now on, they will be known simply as the Redskins. That same year, I got an email from Bob sending me a go-to preliminary injunction order in a case involving restrictions on a topless club, in which the federal judge summarized the issue as, quote, to bear or not to bear, end of quote. And then concluded in a way that caught Bob's attention, quote, should the parties choose to string this case out to trial on the merits, the court encourages reasonable discovery intercourse as they navigate the peaks and valleys of litigation. I told Bob I was appreciative of his willingness to help a new judge, but that this was not what I had in mind when thinking of excellence in writing, nor what Judge McKnight was thinking when he described the goal of a judge's written work to be accuracy in the law's application and excellence in its expression. Then, for a reason I don't quite remember, in 2019, Bob sent me an email containing a picture of Judge Bell with this language, and I think it may be up on the screen now. Great to catch up. Hope to see you in person soon. Per our discussion, attached is the picture of Ken. I believe it was from the McGuire Woods website. Then Bob. As I look at it again, there is a hint of a smile. Wishing you all the best, Bobby. Hoping that a look at the light side of the law and friendship with Bob Mendenhall might balance the other fine reflections we have heard today, I offer these supplementary remarks and think of Bob with more than a hint of a smile.
Any further comments? I had the privilege of being partners with Bob for 3 years at Mayor Brown, and I really can't think of him without also thinking about Frank Blanchfield, that they were so connected. And Frank could quite vehemently and wax poetic and enthusiastic about some topic or issue, and you could just see Bob's faces. I'll get him down off the ledge later. We'll just let him simmer for a while. He was a perfect counterpoint to Frank's enthusiasm. It's a cliche, of course, but the world would be a much better place if there were more Bob Mendenhalls. The court orders that the comments presented at this hour be spread upon the minutes of this court and filed with copies presented to the family of our departed brother at the bar.
I didn't know Bob as well as a lot of you all are. I'm a little bit, just a very little bit younger than you all, but what I knew about him and what I've heard again today is they say that there are giants upon whom shoulders that we stand. And Lauren, your dad was one of them. On behalf of the judges of the Mecklenburg County Superior Court, the court orders that the comments at this hour be spread upon the minutes of this state court and filed with the clerk of court for Mecklenburg County.
The court orders that the U.S. Marshal adjourn this joint memorial session of the court in memory and out of respect for Mr. Robert L. Mendenhall.
Fare thee well, colleague, and Godspeed. Sheriff, please adjourn this court in honor and memory of Mr. Robert L. Mendenhall.
All rise. Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes. The joint session of the federal and state court is adjourned in memory of and out of respect for Mr. Robert L. Mendenhall.
Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. The memorial session of the United States District Court for the Western District of North Carolina is adjourned in memory of and out of respect for Robert L. Mendenhall.
He did say adjourned.